After a wonderful session last evening with Mr. Thakur on the issue of COVID-19 and its impact on contracts and financial agreements, we are here with day two of our webinar series. Mr. Anshin Desai, Senior Advocate, will be taking us through the subject of Order 7, Rule 11 of the Civil Procedure Code. There have been a whole series of conflicting judgments on either sides, and we had requested Mr. Desai to take us through the judgments on either sides and try and help us resolve this whole issue of how to reconcile. At the very outset, I would like to thank Mr. Dhruven Shah, the president of the AGFTC, and Sri Anil Bhai Shah, South Gujarat Federation. Thank you so much, both of you, for helping us through this entire webinar series. And a big welcome and a sense of gratitude to Sri Anshin Bhai Desai for sparing his time to help us through this subject. Anshin Bhai, thank you very much. Over to you.
Early good evening to everyone. Thanks a lot, Parth. Pleasure is all mine. We are all free birds just now doing nothing. So this is a good activity that you people have started. And we also are revising our books, getting ready for the courts to restart. So let me slowly just start because this being a very important issue in today's times, where Order 7 Rule 11 is being used time and again by the defendants in a suit. Let me just convey in brief the usage of Order 7 Rule 11. The maximum usage of Order 7 Rule 11 in today's scenario.
Just to stop you, Tamaru, Mike, can you put it a little closer to you? The audio is slightly faint.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, better.
Can you hear me clearly now?
Yes, now? better.
Yeah, all right.
Yes,
all right. Sorry. Sorry. So just to give a brief scenario of Order 7 Rule 11, that this provision is a old provision in the code, but was used initially right from about 1977, but is used more in these days because of long pending litigations. The suits, once they are instituted, will take years to get the adjudication done, and the properties are stored. The rights of parties for ownership disputes, title disputes are all put to a standstill pending the suits. So let me start from this, that this being a very, very important provision. In fact, one can dare to say that after Order 39, injunction 1 and 2, this may be probably in today's world one of the most important provisions which is being used and which is being deliberated by civil courts, high courts, and now even by the Honorable Supreme Court, because this, if entertained, an application under Order 7 Rule 11, if entertained, terminates a proceeding, terminates a suit, either way, so that the proceedings are carried out further by way of an appeal or a revision, then it goes to the Supreme Court by way of an SLP. The provision has been read and reread, that what does it mainly contain? Let me first try and summarize that today the courts are also looking into an important issue where abuse is also one of the grounds which is usually taken, that abuse of process of the court by instituting completely frivolous and vexatious suits, primarily to strangulate the defendants, to stall usage of immovable properties, its development, its the stagnation, to stop that, the suits are instituted. So I may just pause here for a moment by saying that lis pendens applies in the 52 of the Transfer of Property Act as far as the whole of the nation is concerned, except in the state of Maharashtra and Gujarat, there is an amendment that the lis pendens of the suit has to be registered before the Office of Sub-Registrar. Mere institution of suit will not a mere institution of suit will not stall the proceedings as far as state of Gujarat is concerned, which is a good amendment as far as property strangulation is concerned. Now suits are instituted under the civil manual, by under the practice adopted is under civil manual. The manual is of 1960 and under CPC, the Civil Procedure Code. This provision is now being implemented, used and interpreted by civil courts, high courts, and the Honorable Supreme Court time and again. A difficult situation has arisen today because of contrary decisions being rendered by even the Honorable Supreme Court, our courts, high courts, etc. By ultimately coming to conclusion that these are decisions in the facts and circumstances of the case. The dichotomy, the issue which has arisen and what debate we are trying to enter into is a little tricky debate, that there cannot be a judgment where the facts are verbatim same. The judgment will always differ from case to case. The learned judge's perspective will also depend upon the facts of the case, and that is how our system works. That a judge will look into the matter in a different perspective, a B judge will look into the matter in a separate perspective. But that is how the judicial system is, and that is how the judgments are evolved from time to time. Under Order 7 Rule 11, the decisions are mainly on the following points. One, most common point which is now debated upon and looked into by the courts at the institution of suit is, first I'm just highlighting the points that this is how the proceedings arise in today's world, that the suit is hopelessly time barred. It is hit by law of limitation, and in the judgment of Hardesh Wars, which the citation I'll just come to that afterwards, the law of limitation has been read into Order 7 Rule 11D as barred by law. There are decisions which also have taken a bit of contrary view by not looking into Hardesh Wars, but most of the decisions follow the 711D by saying barred by law means law includes law of limitation. Another issue on which these applications are mainly filed, one is law of limitation, the suit being time barred. Second one is cause of action, that the cause of action is not disclosed, or there is an absence of proper cause of action, or a mandatory provision of cause of action is just some cause of action is mentioned, that I have learned about it recently in the recent past, and therefore from that date the limitation has to start. On these issues also there is a lot of deliberation and catching of decisions of our court as well as the Honorable Supreme Court have been delivered. One more avenue as far as 711, where the lawyers have started to contend that frivolity of a suit, that the suit is frivolous, vexatious, and results in abuse of process of court, should also be considered as one of the ingredients of Order 7 Rule 11, so as to stall unnecessary litigation, and that litigation should be put to an end at the initial stage so that everyone can enjoy the fruits of the decree and may not wait for a long trial if the suit on the face of it, by bare perusal of the plaint, as the judgments are on this, that the bare perusal of the plaint is to be seen, can it be read that the suit is frivolous, vexatious, and results in abuse of the process of court. Now, there also there are a couple of judgments, in two judgments, where the court has come to a conclusion, the Honorable Supreme Court has come to a conclusion that Order 7 Rule 11 can be considered as a primary vexatious suit or a frivolous suit, can be considered as an abuse of the process of court and can be read into Order 7 Rule 11. Now, three more points on this, where the litigation is concentrated today, is that despite a document being registered or a relinquishment deed or some document being registered, the doctrine of deemed knowledge is carved out in the case of Dilbu. I'm sorry, it should be 2000. It's a typographical error, not 2007. In the year 2000, deemed knowledge concept was developed by saying that registering a document in the office of the sub-registrar under the provisions of Registration Act, Section 17, etc., there is a notice to the public at large, and it can be said that that is the date of knowledge. Now, if a person gets a document registered, and after registration of the document, after, for instance, it's a title suit, and after a period of 3 years or so, someone approaches the court on some averment by saying that it is fraud, deceit, misrepresentation, coercion, etc. Can it be looked into or not? There also, in deemed knowledge concept has been clearly developed. There also there are two views available. That deemed knowledge is merely by registering a document, you cannot say that it is noticed to the public at large. And therefore, there are law judgments on this both the sides as far as this issue is also concerned. Then Order 7 Rule 11 is also considered. Now there is a recent decision which says that suit cannot be rejected in part. The division bench of Bombay High Court, in a reported decision in AIR, has come to a conclusion that yes, suit can be rejected in part. In Bombay, there is a practice where many applications are filed and many suits are instituted, and they have been rejected in part, and the Honorable Supreme Court has confirmed the same also. But now there is a judgment in the year 2018 that no play cannot be rejected in part by some of the defendants, and it has to be considered as a whole. Now, the last point on which, according to me, the applications are filed by the parties is on revenue entries. That mutation of revenue entry in the revenue records having a presumptive value, and therefore service of notice in all of the acts in almost all the state land laws, there is a provision where the notice has to be mandatorily served to the co-owners or the heirs and legal representatives, etc., for mutation of entry and thereafter certification, where it is usually the period is 30 days. Now that is also considered by courts as date of knowledge, that if a revenue entry, there is a change in partition in a property by way of a relinquishment, partition, or sale, anything where the title of the property is to change. Once the notice is served to the revenue by the revenue authority to the co-owners or others who are or the brothers, sisters, etc., and they accept it and do not lodge objections to the said notice within a period of 30 days, then also that is considered as a valid date of knowledge. And anything after that can be a ground can be raised that there is delay, and deemed knowledge principle will apply. These, according to me, are the main issues based on which courts have rendered decisions granting or rejecting applications under Order 7 Rule 11. The current deliberation on this issue is whether contrary decisions on the subject would lead to confusion of which judgment to be followed. Yes, it's a problem that we all appear on either lawyers who are here with me in this webinar, that we all appear for either of the sides, and this becomes an issue that today you will cite one judgment, tomorrow you will cite another judgment, and we'll all rely upon the judgments which look back in time as far as we are concerned. But let me start here with a very interesting judgment, which is the first probably in line as far as I know. It's a first authoritative decision, if I can dare to say so. Is 1977, 4 Supreme Court cases, 467. This judgment of the Honorable Justice Krishna Iyer, as it then was, is laying down very strict interpretation of Order 7 Rule 11. That if a suit is found to be frivolous, cost should be imposed. Not only cost should be imposed, but realistic cost should be imposed. Secondly, it can be termed as abuse of process of the court and a clear wastage of a process of the court. Contempt proceedings can be initiated for institution of such suits. And interestingly, if this judgment is looked into, it's a short judgment, but it also says that it is the duty of the advocate to also advise correctly. In if the advocate has drafted the plaint and instituted the suit which is found to be frivolous, appropriate steps can be taken, and responsibility of the advocate can also be thrust into. This was also one of the arguments in this judgment of 1977. Now, in today's world, if we check up, this judgment is referred in several of the decisions by the Honorable Supreme Court, by high courts, everywhere. But the issue arises regarding dichotomy or contradiction in the judgments at a point of time when there are judgments on both the sides which are cited. At times, the honorable courts refer to the judgment, but merely referring to the judgment and not giving any finding or distinguishing it on even on facts, would it be binding? Can it be said that that judgment is been referred in para so and so, and therefore it has been considered? This creates an issue because thereafter the courts usually say that in the facts and circumstances of the case, so and so order is passed, so and so application is granted or rejected or quashed or set aside. Now, the a very important provision is there in civil manual. If, as far as I know, in the past 2 decades, 25 years, I have hardly seen cases where these provisions are actually looked into. These provisions are put into proper practice. The clerk of the court in the civil courts and or the registrar or the Nazi, there are 3 rules which are very important in civil manual. Rule 7, which deals with institution of suits and how suits are to be instituted. Rule 8b is extremely important. It says it's the next step where examination of the plaint takes place in order to determine whether it should be rejected under Order 7 Rule 11 or not. Now comes a very most important rule, Rule 10, which if we read any of the decisions of the recent past, or even more than for 10, 15 years or 20 years back, hardly anyone will find that these rules have been considered, one, or any of these rules have been found to be correctly applied at the time of institution of suit. Rule 10 is one of the most important rules, which is probably missed by the courts or the examining officers at the time when the suit is instituted and is to be registered in the register. Rule 10 says that if the officer examining the plaint finds it complies with all the requirements meaning including process, including court fees, cause of action, the required annexures, exhibits, etc., then he can register the same. Like if a suit is instituted as far as land is concerned, the certified revenue entries are to be placed on record. If they are not placed, what happens, etc. These are all checkpoints which the examining officer is required to look into. But if the officer finds that the plaint can be rejected under Order 7 Rule 11 of CPC, he should, the words used are should, refer the matter to the judge for orders. Now, when such cases are referred to the judge for orders, it becomes a preliminary hearing on without an application under Order 7 Rule 11. One of the decisions, recent decisions of our High Court, the Honorable Gujarat High Court of Honorable Justice Pardiwal, has considered this provision in detail. And while considering a second appeal, confirming the orders of the trial court and the appellate court granting application Order 7 Rule 11, has not only looked into these rules, but the judgment directs the trial courts to look into the judgment which the Honorable Court has delivered and then register a suit, because the whole rigmarole of going for trial in several suits can be avoided if at inception under Order 7 Rule 11 the judge feels that yes, the officer has given this referred the matter for this purpose, hearing can take place, and after hearing appropriate order can be passed. Therefore, according to me, no application under Order 7 Rule 11 is also required. Then the civil manual also says, that is what I said, that the civil manual itself is a procedure which is provided for and rarely used by trial courts. Now, if that is used by the trial courts often, then we may see the cases being decided at preliminary issue. Yes, every party has a right to appeal and challenge it by way of revision or an appeal. Either way, the decision comes. So, but at the same time, if it is decided at that stage, there is a possibility that the matter will end and the property, usually these are issues which arise because of property and the cases may come to an end. Yes, it is premature death of a litigation, but that premature death may be for the betterment of the defendant who may be a true owner. And in today's world, this provision therefore is very, very relevant. Then I may say that because of the skyrocketing prices of immovable properties, opening up of claims after a period of limitation has lapsed, opening up of settled issues of ownership, possession, partition after several decades by saying that my mother, my so and so, my father had not signed this, the record of rights, the name is not there in 1971, 1981, etc. And therefore, this is a fraud. The mandatory provision of mutation is not carried out properly, and therefore fraud, there is no limitation, and therefore it can be looked into. That is usually the cause of action which is shown. At that point of time, there are several proceedings which are initiated either simultaneously or one after another. The first usually is a revenue, take an illustration of revenue entry. A revenue mutation of a revenue entry is usually challenged before the authority, revenue authority in appeal, by saying that the notice is not served. I was not my father or mother was not residing at this address. I am a co-owner. My name was wrongly not shown. The division of property did not show my name, etc. So what they do is they go to the revenue authority, challenge the same before the authority by raising these contentions that this is a fraud and my valuable property has been lost, and therefore look into it. Now simultaneously, or after some notice is issued by the revenue authority, there is an institution of this suit. Suit challenging not only those proceedings by earlier proceedings, but saying that now if the property is sold, the sale deed is challenged, the earlier transaction, permanent injunction is sought, declaration is sought. So person who has bought it in good faith will suffer institution of such suits, which will lie just for the sake of filing, to see to it that something is found out as far as settlement is concerned in these proceedings. Uh, Cause of action, which also becomes very, very relevant, is because in cause of action, usually what is shown is that I have now gained knowledge. Now, it's a very easy terminology to use in a plaint, in a drafting of plaint, that I have now gained knowledge. How have you gained knowledge? Can the court look into it at the stage of deciding an application under Order 7 Rule 11? Why should the court not look into it so that the whole trial can be injuncted at one stage and 711 application can be considered? By claiming date of knowledge, cause of action is shown, and thereafter or it is also stated at points of time that henceforth I have now just recent past I have learned about this XYZ, and therefore the consideration of cause of action is there, and the suit is required to be tried, and only after leading of evidence the suit can be decided. All of us, all lawyers must have come across this provision in the above cases, and now also after amendment in section 6 of the Hindu Succession Act, which says the daughter is also co-personal and the daughter is a right in the property. Huge flow of litigation has started after this amendment. I would dare to say there is a lot of misuse of this amendment, that the daughter or the father has died prior to the date of amendment in section 6 of the Hindu Succession Act. No one challenges it in the if there is a case, or if there is no case also. No one has challenged or asserted their right, rightly or wrongly, before the date of amendment in section 6 of the Hindu Succession Act. Despite that, the heirs or legal representatives challenge first, like I said, the revenue entry, then come before the court by way of institution of suit, and rely upon some revenue entry prior in point of time when the mother or father or brother or someone has passed away and the name has not been mutated. Thereafter, challenge the proceedings. Here, in proceedings of Hindu Succession Act, in the proceeding of Hindu Succession Act after the amendment, the Honorable Supreme Court as of now has held that this provision cannot be made retrospective. It is not a provision which is retrospective in nature, and therefore such suits instituted by heirs and legal representatives are at times rejected by entertaining application under Order 7 Rule 11. These are orders which have attained finality in several unreported judgments. First appeals are dismissed, second appeals are dismissed, and the SLPs are also dismissed with costs where such matters are opened up of entry of 1961, 70, etc. The whole purpose, the whole gamut of this exercise of Order 7 Rule 11, in my view, is required to be looked into from the aspect of not only skyrocketing prices, but law of limitation is a law of repose. It has to end at a point of time. There may be a case where there is real injustice, but despite that, the court has said that law of limitation is a law. As far as suits are concerned, there is no question of delay, there is no provision, and therefore it has to be considered as it is. And if there is a delay of even a minute after the limitation is expired, the suit cannot be entertained. The suits are therefore, I would rate the suits or term the suits as extortion suits. Most of the cases, if you open the register of cases of any civil court in big cities in India like Ahmedabad, Surat, Baroda, Rajkot, one will find that most of the suits either are just filed where no injunction is pressed or no injunction is granted. They are just filed and it is kept pending to see to it that anyone who sells or tries to develop the property or wants to change the purpose of the property, there will be a time when they will just give a public notice in the newspaper by saying that so and so suit is instituted by so and the proceedings are pending. So the settlement takes place. A person is bound to lose a lot of money, a property, or that is undue harassment, and this can be also termed as extortion suits. Now, another issue which is also debated upon under Order 7 Rule 11, in which also there are judgments on both the sides, that agreements to sell. Agreements to sell, do they confer right? Unregistered agreements to sell crop up. When do they crop up? On a simple stamp of rupees 20 or 100 or anything. Once a property is sold, when a public notice is given before the sale for due diligence, title clearance, etc. In reply to the title clearance, some third party will get up and say that there is one agreement to sell, which I am showing. It is for so and so consideration, and therefore I have a right to purchase the property. You may not purchase the property, and if you purchase, it will be at your risk cost, and we will litigate as far as this issue is concerned. This is another issue, which is a burning issue in which further two issues arise, where also law is I can say that settled as far as one point is concerned, that in such agreements to sell on mere piece of paper, which are usually loan or mortgage documents. I would dare to say that they are loan or mortgage documents because there is never any intention to enforce these documents. In India, it is a normal practice that to avoid registration charges, that is a stamp duty, and to avoid lengthy and tedious procedure of bank loans and paperwork, what people do, they take money as unsecured loans from unregistered money lenders at very high rates of interest, and we see that they cannot pay the amount, and usually what happens is that the paper on which they have written at that point of time, thinking that they'll pay back the loan. If the loan is taken for about 10 lakhs and the property is at that time of rupees a crore, and so when the amount, they can't repay the 10 lakhs, so property has reached a phenomenal proportion, the price, it would be about 5 crores, 10 crores and all. And at that point of time, the money lenders who are unregistered money lenders under the Money Lending Act, if they are not registered, they would go and get the property stagnated by institution of suits, etc. Now, these documents, take for instance unregistered agreements, etc., or which are not registered. Those Section 17 of the Registration Act renders agreements registrable. As prima facie, there is an authenticity of these documents if they are registered. Now, in unregistered documents, what happens? In unregistered documents, the consideration which is shown is usually cash transaction. Why cash transaction is shown? Because the amount which is mentioned is usually never transferred from A to B. So that is from purchaser to seller, if they can be termed as purchaser, because these are all loan documents. And to avoid income tax and avoid all more of litigation, etc., they usually mention cash transactions. There, probably, if I'm not mistaken, in 2001 and then in 2006, two lead judgments have been delivered by our court, Honorable Gujarat High Court, where it has been held that if a suit is instituted for specific performance or for any other purpose, declaration and permanent injunction, etc., the same has to be if in the document there is a cash transaction which is mentioned, the suit has to be accompanied by bank certificate, papers of income tax, challan, etc. To even for the purpose of injunction, it can be considered. In today's world, there are arguments being leveled in courts, and the courts are considering that such cash transactions, which ultimately will not lead to a situation where the suit can be decreed, can it not be looked into under Order 7 Rule 11 for the purpose of terminating the suit proceedings? Now, revenue proceedings challenge, institution of suit, and a new, from about 10, 12 years, a new system has started that applications are made by way of criminal complaints to SIT, Special Investigating Team, uh, which is headed by the collector, the district magistrate of the district, and in which the collector decides, the team decides, like a judge of a civil court, the authenticity of the document, the suit, and the proceedings, and prima facie they run to a conclusion, which ultimately also becomes a source of extortion. This, by way of institution of civil proceedings, or that complaint is converted into an FIR, and thereafter the proceedings are settled. And therefore, Order 7 Rule 11 in today's context becomes very, very important, where the courts have to take a view which leads to termination of proceedings, at times maybe termination of proceedings. Therefore, let me now take you all to the decisions on Order 7 Rule 11, where rejection of plaint is granted. There are decisions and decisions, hundreds of decisions on both the sides now, mainly on the application being considered and granted. But these are few decisions where it has been decided probably for the first time in the case of Prabhakar in 2015 SCC, that principle that right is not exercised for a long time, which is non-existent. The words used are right not exercised for a long time is non-existent, even when there is no limitation prescribed by any statute relating to certain proceedings. In such cases, courts have coined the doctrine of delay and laches, as well as the doctrine of acquiescence and non-suiting the litigations to approach the court belatedly without any justifiable explanation for bringing the action after unreasonable time. So the court has built into avenue which probably the courts had not entered into in detail, that principle that a right not exercised for a long time. So right was there, but not exercised for a long time becomes non-existent. Then comes the lead judgment, which I started my speech with, 77 4 ACC 467, which the words used are very strong, that if on a meaningful reading of a plaint, it is manifestly vexatious and meritless in the sense of not disclosing a clear right to sue, power under Order 7 Rule 11 must be exercised. Judgments on this next point, right from 77, are also there, which say that if clever drafting, the words used by the Honorable Supreme Court are clever and shrewd drafting, that attribute goes to a lawyer, that if because of clever and shrewd drafting, it has created an illusion of cause of action, it has to be nipped in the bud at the first hearing. The first hearing, I can relate it to the civil manual, Order 10, Rule 10 and 8, where it can be looked into that is the suit required to be tried at all. Then in the very judgment, the court has said the trial courts must imperatively insist on examining the party at the first hearing so that bogus litigation can be shot down at the earliest. Then comes a case where again delay was considered, 2002-10 SCC 501, where no explanation whatsoever was available on the plaint. Now these are judgments which say that bare reading of the plaint. Now bare reading of the plaint, there are debates and arguments which were raised in this case also, that the annexures or the marks which are the documents which are annexed in the documentary evidence list along with the plaint, can they be prima facie looked into or not? There are now, the courts do look into it at the stage of appeal or revision also, that ultimately what are you seeing? You are looking at a document, for instance, what I stated, agreement to sell with a cash transaction, can it be looked into or not? Now, here also 77.4 SCC was followed. Then 2005 5 SCC 540, where the court has said the clever drafting with a view to get over the bar of limitation. Now, what happens is the cause of action, as I stated earlier, the law says that cause of action, when you say that it is by deceit or fraud, cannot be looked into at the stage of Order 7 Rule 11. There are few judgments. One of this is this judgment of N.V. Srinivas Murthy, which says that with a view to get over the bar of limitation, plaint was rightly rejected under Order 7 Rule 11. And on the examination of the plaint, the suit seemed to be clearly barred on the facts stated in the plaint itself. The suit as framed prima facie was barred by law of limitation. The court has further, in this case, also seen that even under Order 2 Rule 2, the suit was barred. Though there also again there are decisions that res judicata, Order 2 Rule 2, are not issues which are to be considered at the stage of Order 7 Rule 11 application. I'll just distinguish one judgment which takes care of this dichotomy. Then comes 2003 1 SCC, that in this case the court did follow that it can be rejected even before issuance of summons. So it is like Civil Manual 1960 being put in force, that at the stage of preliminary the court can do it. Can it do it ex parte or not would be the question. Can it do it by party or not? At that stage is what the consideration of the court was. In this case, 2003 1 SCC 557. Then 98 2 SCC is also widely used, and it follows 77 4 SCC, so I may not repeat that. Rule 8B of the Civil Manual was also considered in that case, and the limitation was a ground which can be raised at the time of consideration of application Order 7 Rule 11. Probably here also, if I'm not mistaken, this is the first judgment on the line, which reads that Order 7 Rule 11D, which ends at barred by law of limitation, can be read as which I stated earlier today, that this is Hardeshwar's judgment, which says that law of limitation can be read into under Order 7 Rule 11D as barred by law. This is an important judgment which is being looked into by courts time and again. Then comes the contract must be performed within a reasonable time. 97.3 SCC 1. Now the documents of under the provisions of the documents where the transfer of property is to take place by way of agreement, etc. Time being the essence of the contract. Now the law is almost developed on this. The time has to be the essence of the contract because the property prices escalate and they can't be kept in limbo for a long time. So in this case, the court has said that escalation of property cannot be ignored. Escalation of property is a ground which can be considered and read under Order 7 Rule 11 for the purpose of frivolity of the suit or delay in the institution of the suit. The decisions which are mentioned in my notes on para 10 are unreported decisions which deal with few of the above contentions which I am raising and pointing out, that Order 7 Rule 11 says this, and these are the A to H are the principles. These are the details of unreported decisions. The judgments of the High Court are in detail. They are exhaustive judgments and confirmed by the Honorable Supreme Court in the recent past as far as these issues are concerned. Then I may also submit on the point of the judgments and settled principles, that these are what would be the situation if these judgments and several other judgments are not looked into while considering another set of judgments. So the issue which we are discussing today, that 711, now this is one set of judgments. Now what happens when such motivated frivolous institution of suits which are cleverly drafted, bringing in cause of action, paving way for a list pendants to be recorded for an immovable property to fetter and disturb the otherwise legal, valid and peaceful title of the person of an immovable property is concerned, what would be the situation? There would be a hanging sword on the purchasers, owners, and proceedings would be perpetual in nature, that is for all times to come. A suit usually takes 8 to 10 years. The matter will go to the High Court. Some party will challenge it, either of the losing party. There will be an appeal. Appeal will, if it is being first appeal, are usually admitted. So the first appeal will take about 5-6 years, and thereafter the Honorable Supreme Court. By that time, in several cases, we see a generation changes. The suits are pending, appeals are pending. Then the Supreme Court decides the SLP. If a person has succeeded, the issue comes of execution. When execution will take place? In execution, it is like a de novo trial. It is like a suit. All types of contentions are taken, and ultimately, what happens is either they are settled or there is a new round of litigation for another 5 to 10 years. This is the situation in which we are considering Order 7 Rule 11 application. Now, as I stated, if we see the another set of judgments where it is not granted, a recent judgment in the case of Chotanbe, where a suit was instituted after a period of 17 years, 17 years on the ground, and the ground or a base ground which was raised was fraud, upon which the plaintiff came to know in 2013. It was between brothers, and a suit was barred by limitation. The Supreme Court held that the suit barred by limitation in such a case is a triable issue, and therefore the plaint cannot be rejected. The judgment of Chotanbe, in the judgment of Chotanbe 77, Supreme Court is also referred. One or two judgments which are stated above are also referred, but there is no finding on the state judgment. Now, this being a judgment of 2018, what happens to the cases where these issues are pending? What happens to cases where these issues are being deliberated, that which is the judgment which is required to be followed? Similar is the case in 2006, 3 SCC 634. This is a judgment where several decisions were referred to. Even 77, the first judgment, as I know, is referred to. But where it was stated that the date of performance of contract was not fixed, then the law of limitation cannot be a deciding factor. Yes, injunction can be refused, but law of limitation cannot be a deciding factor for throwing out the suit, the plaintiff, at the stage of Order 7 Rule 11. Now, this judgment considers in the on the next page, I'll show the chart, all the judgments. But in the judgment of this 2006, none of the cases are otherwise distinguished by, except for, yes, by saying that there is a document, there is no time mentioned, performance of contract is not fixed. Then comes the case of 2019, where also the suit, this is also a very recent decision, the suit was rejected on the ground of limitation. Despite that, the Honorable Supreme Court held that no, this is a plea seeking rejection of plaint, limitation in this case, where deception and fraud words were used in the plaint. Once the words deception and fraud is used, then the suit has to be tried, and it has to come to a logical end after leading of evidence. Now, during this 2018-19, there are two other unreported decisions of the Honorable Supreme Court, which has rejected the plaint on the ground of limitation by considering the earlier judgments, 77 judgment and other judgments. But then all these judgments, in short, do not otherwise contradict the judgments by mere reference. There is no, like, if you see big Roman 4, the 2006 3 SCC judgment, which I am citing, I stated that what was the consideration in 2006 3 SCC 634. Question of limitation could be decided only after taking evidence and recording a finding. That is the first principle laid down. Issues on delay and limitation cannot be decided as a preliminary issue. Vis-a-vis this, if the other chart, the comparative portion is seen, case laws, contrary to the state principle, as I stated, 77 Supreme Court cases, Rajnarayan's case, NV Srinivasa's case, 2003 one Salim Bhai versus State of Maharashtra case, in which, and 98 ITC, all these judgments find place in 2006. The parties have cited these judgments, but there is no distinguishing finding except of saying that there the time was not a time of performance was not mentioned. So therefore, there is again an issue that are the judgments on the right hand side to be followed, or are the judgments on the left hand side to be followed, and how are they to be followed at what point of time? Contrary decisions by coming to a conclusion that the cases are decided on peculiar facts and circumstances also lead to a situation where no facts can be similar. One view, that mere mention of the word fraud is enough to reject an application under Order 7 Rule 11 by concluding that these are disputed questions of fact can be decided only after leading evidence. Law of precedence. Therefore comes an issue. What is a precedent? And Article 141 of the Constitution, how is it to be looked into? Law of precedence has evolved and several decisions have been pronounced on which law should be considered, how they are required to be considered, and what is the effect of a judgment which is later in point of time, and in the facts and circumstances. By merely saying in the facts of circumstances what is to be done. Therefore, judicial precedence on per incurium. It is being argued now before the courts that what happens in such cases where the dichotomy is there, that what happens when to this, for instance, the first judgment in Big Roman 5 2013 3 SCC 63, judgment rendered in ignorance of earlier judgments, the benches of co-equal strength renders the same per incurium, cannot be elevated to the status of precedent. After just citing a few judgments, I'll dare to take you to show that what happens when the judgment refers to a judgment but does not give finding on it. Can it be said to be per incurium? What is it? Or can it be stated as stare decisis, that a judgment which is holding good, for instance, 77 Supreme Court cases, no court has said, no, the Honorable Supreme Court has nowhere said that this is not a good law at any point of time, as I understand. Then what happens to that judgment? What are the findings of that judgment? How far are they binding on the trial court, on the High Court, and even binding on the Honorable Supreme Court? Now, 2018 4 SCC 743 says the ratio decidendi of a judgment is a principle of law adopted having regard to the line of reasoning of the judge, which alone binds in future cases. Such principle can only be laid down after a discussion of the relevant provisions and the case law on the subject. If certain conclusions alone are arrived at without any reference to any case law, it would be difficult to hold that such a judgment would be binding upon us and that we should have to follow it. Now, there are matters which are pending in Gujarat High Court where Chotanbene judgment is being cited by one side. We cite that Chotanbene judgment in which 77 is pointed out, as I stated here. Now, what happens if there is no finding on that? And we find a judgment in which a similar provision is there and 77 Supreme Court cases is followed, then which judgment is binding? Then comes the issue later in point of time, strength of the bench, co-equal bench. Now, what happens if the bench is same? If the bench, in the sense the strength of the bench is same, then the later in point of time is same. But if the provision is same and the similarity of facts are such that one judgment even prior in point of time is to be considered, then can be considered. According to my view, that can be considered and that can be argued before the court that though this is later in point of time of a co-equal strength, the judgments cited are the same, but the nearer facts or the provision is nearer to the earlier judgment. The earlier judgment can be said to be binding and can be followed by the court. Then 2017 16 SCC 680, a decision or judgment can also be per incurium if it is not possible to reconcile its ratio with that of a previously pronounced judgment of a co-equal bench or a larger bench. There can be no scintilla of doubt that an earlier decision of co-equal bench binds the bench of the same strength. And so also in AR 1962 Supreme Court 83, where it is said that law will be bereft of all its utility if it should be thrown into a state of uncertainty by reason of conflicting decisions. It sometimes happens that an earlier decision given by a bench is not brought to the notice of a bench hearing the same question, and a contrary decision is given without reference to the earlier decision. This judgment also is a very important judgment as far as precedents are concerned, and in the current scenario, these four judgments and several other judgments, so these are a few judgments which deal with probably principles of precedent under Article 141, that what is to be done. And I would submit that here all of us should try, the endeavor should be to see to it that as far as Order 7 Rule 11 is concerned, the law, there cannot be any law, there cannot be a straitjacket formula that the application has to be rejected or the application has to be granted in so and so case. But if the base principles of delay, that is limitation, by coming out by trying to come out on of it by saying in the cause, stating in the cause of action of fraud, etc. is there, then can it be considered or cannot be considered? I would say that then the judgments which do not consider the earlier judgments can be cited, but the courts, even the lower court or the Honorable High Court, can look into the judgment which is prior in point of time and look into the nearest facts available and decide the case. Therefore, I stated that the situation in the current scenario is that after reading the plaint as a whole, the facts differ or not, the judgment is per incurium or not, when a law has been laid down, can be considered as obiter dicta or not, etc. Questions arise whether the provisions of Law of Limitation, Registration Act, Transfer of Property Act, Specific Relief Act can be ignored, and tremendous burden on the judiciary of easy institution of civil suits can be reduced at the initial stage. Subsequently, if the application is granted and the plaint is rejected, can that issue be deliberated in higher courts and rigmarole of long litigation be curtailed? The following important terminologies I would submit are very important for the today's topic. But before going there are issues which have arisen that at what stage the application is required to be considered. At initial stage, now take an example illustration where Order 7 rule application is not filed and the clerk of the court or the registrar or the examining officer does not point out to the learned judge, and no party files an application, the suit proceeds. At a point of time, a lawyer changes or wisdom prevails by the and a lawyer who is appearing for the defendant thinks that no, this suit ought to have been rejected earlier, and an application is filed. At what stage can it be filed? There are about 4 decisions of which I know where the law is laid down by the Honorable Supreme Court that if, and our High Court, that if the application is filed even at a belated stage, if the suit can be rejected, it should be rejected. There are a few unreported decisions which also take a view that no, it cannot be filed and circulated after a long passage of time. Then the second issue, before I take the ratio decidency, etc., the terminologies. Second issue is that what is to be heard first? Exhibit 5, that is injunction application, or Order 7 Rule 11 application, which is an application which is required to be considered. Usually the matters reach High Courts, and the High Court usually passes an order that both to be heard together, or Order 7 Rule 11 to precede injunction application, which the parties argue that that should be preceded in point of time, and that is an application which terminates the proceedings. If it terminates the proceedings, there is no question of any injunction. Now here again, I'm sorry to say, here again there are 2 views. There is the reported judgment which says to be heard together. There is also an unreported judgment which says that it has to be heard separately, but 711 has to precede hearing of injunction application. Now, as far as today's issue is concerned, the following, that is ratio decidendi, obiter dicta, per incurium, res integra, stare decisis, and sub silentio, along with ex cathedra, are the consideration, the terminology which we will have to just look into for the purpose of deciding that how a judgment which is contradictory in nature, as far as the law which is cited by one party and which is not looked into or looked into by the other court, and a judgment is there, then these, according to me, should be the guiding forces where the court can decide that what is ratio decidendi. Everyone knows that it is a rational or reason, or is the ratio which is laid down. It means the essence of a decision and the principle upon which a case is decided. It has to be the law declared by the court, which lays down a law, is ratio decidendi. Then obiter dicta, remarks of a judge are not a decision, maybe comments, thoughts or illustrations. We may find passing observations, as we use the word, the lawyers use, the honorable judges use the word, that these are all passing observations. These are illustrative in nature. Yes, the case is decided either way, but this can be termed as obiter and therefore cannot become ratio decidendi. Then comes the case that it is per incurium. As I stated earlier, that mere reference of decisions. What has happened is the parties refer to decisions. The court decides the case on facts. The court is duty bound, and therefore the court will reflect in the decision that A advocate has cited this 5 and B these 5 decisions, and B advocate has cited these 7 decisions. With these decisions, the parties will raise all contentions, and the court decides on the facts and circumstances of the case. When the court decides on the facts and circumstances of the case, what happens to the decisions which are cited and decided by the courts on the earlier occasions. There comes the issue of per incurium, the decisions rendered in ignorance of earlier decisions or ignorance of an statute also. Now, it per incurium, I would dare to go to this limit by saying that it be considered, according to me, it can be considered per incurium by mere mention of a judgment. The court ignoring the ratio of that judgment, if there is a ratio in that judgment, law is laid down in the judgment. If that ratio is ignored, and if that ratio is ignored and the decision is contrary to the judgment which is cited by one party, according to me, can also be argued as it is per incurium. Then comes the question of res integra, that which is untouched, entirely new or undecided. Now, Order 2, Rule 2, res judicata are all issues which are all, there are, one will find judgments under Order 7, Rule 11, where almost all issues are considered. There are applications which are filed, the time is in of the contract or not. There is a issue of cash transaction. There is an issue of partition. There is an issue where a relief of partition is sought for. And quashment of a sale deed is, registered sale deed is prayed for. Then there are relinquishment deeds. So these are probably the law as far as 711, that what can be considered and what cannot be considered. There is a contradiction, but almost everything today is being tried under Order 7 Rule 11 to see to it that the whole long process of adjudication can be avoided by the defendant. Then comes the question of stay decisions. That 77 Supreme Court, as I have been strenuously saying, that 77 decision, can it be said to be judgment which is holding field and has to be followed by courts? And can it be seen that this comes within the ambit of things decided? According to me, 77 judgment, though a short judgment, but that judgment clinches all the issues. Yes, facts and circumstances of each case with passage of time are required to be seen, but then also I would say that 77 Supreme Court can be applied in almost all these issues which I have stated, at least in the two issues of cause of action and the law of limitation. Then sub silentio, when a particular point of law involved in a decision is not perceived by the court, as I'm saying, a mere reference, then can it be said that it is sub silentio or not? And ex cathedra means with the full authority of the office. Not everything which is stated in the judgment is ex cathedra. Mere casual expression carries no weight. For example, every passing reference of a judge, however eminent, can be considered as an ex cathedra statement having the weight of authority. In several decisions, as far as the provision is concerned, no doubt facts are to be looked into, but precedents cannot be ignored. Precedents, therefore, according to me, as far as this topic is concerned, A, guidance or authority of past decisions for future cases. B, precedents must be reported, may be cited, and may be followed by courts. Precedents have opinion juris, opinion of the law, that is opinion of the law or necessity. These must be followed widely so that law develops according to actual cases. Of course, precedents may not be binding if the same were rendered in ignorance of the statute or a rule having a force of statute. That again is an entirely different aspect. But contradictions do happen as far as 711 are concerned. And therefore, according to me, the above terminology, if checked in totality, one may be able to say that despite of law, the judgments being cited but not referred to, the earlier judgment will hold the field and law precedents can be looked into accordingly. 141, Article 141 of the Constitution of India therefore prescribes that the law declared by the Supreme Court shall be binding on all courts within the territory of India. Hence, it is a constitutional mandate to follow such decisions as binding precedents. While considering one judgment against another, what requires to be called out is whether the principle evolved in the decision based on the statute is ratio decidendi. The distinguishing feature, as I stated, mentioned earlier, is facts of each case. The well-known phrase that no judgment can be read as if it's a statute should be considered. We all face this argument. We all make this argument, and the honorable courts usually tell us that you don't cite this judgment as if it's a statute, and therefore facts of each case are to be looked into. And therefore, there is a divergent opinion as far as Order 7 Rule 11 is concerned, and decision cannot be regarded as a full exposition of law. Then comes the dilemma is when a judge faces conflicting decision of superior courts, there would be a situation where it would be a case of complete fog of authorities. Complete fog of authorities is a phrase used in English judgment. That what is complete fog of authorities? I would say that Order 7 Rule 11 leads to this situation. That a dilemma when both the parties argued, ultimately it is the judge who has to decide, and he is always in a dilemma when contrary judgments, prior, later, same strength, etc., are cited before the authority, before the judge, and what should be the decision. Therefore, there are judgments which have found out that a decision of larger benches will prevail of the decision of smaller benches and inferior courts. B, a decision of a larger bench which merely adds to the principle stated by a larger bench or explains the earlier decision of a larger bench may not be considered to be a decision in conflict with the earlier decision of the larger bench. If the decision of coordinate benches with equal strength differ and later decision does not notice or explain the earlier decision, then the decision closer to the facts of the case can be followed. When the later decision notices, this is important, we'll find this in almost all judgments of Order 7 Rule in either way, notices the earlier decision and distinguishes it, the subsequent decision will prevail over the earlier decision. Now, just pausing here, there is a contrary event which happens in the earlier judgments which I have stated, almost all of them, that a decision is cited, and as I'm repeatedly saying, not referred, only references, there no decision, then what will happen? If a court, considering a provision of law, has two decisions cited before it, a decision citing the same provision is required to be followed as compared to a decision by following an identical provision. Therefore, I would submit, by concluding on this topic, in the current situation, that delay, date of knowledge, deemed knowledge, privilege, abuse may be considered relevant in each case to be read in the provisions of Order 7 Rule 11 of Civil Procedure Code. I am thankful for giving me this opportunity, Parth, and all other hosts for preparing on this topic and trying to make my best effort to see to it honestly that I can show something, and that is all which I would conclude to.
Thank you, Anshin Bhai. This was an excellent session that we have had. There are a few queries that we have.
Yes.
I will take them one by one, and maybe you can consider answering them. We still have about another 10-15 minutes so that
Yes.
we can deal with them.
Yes.
One of the queries that we are having is you referred to the issue of civil manual. Yes. Where at the stage of institution itself, without even prior to the issuance of notice,
yes,
the court can consider rejecting the very plaint.
Yes.
In such a situation, is it possible, should the courts prior to issuance of notice stage also reject the plaints, or wait for a notice to be issued, because otherwise it will lead to dragging the litigations?
No. Therefore, there are cases where prior, some cases are pending before our court also, High Court also. There are cases where now, after the judgment of Honorable Justice Pardiwala, which is ordered to be circulated to all civil courts, for instance, or even prior to that, there are a few appeals which are pending in High Court, where the clerk of the court or the examining officer, as I stated, referred to the judge for preliminary hearing. The preliminary hearing is between the learned judge, that is the trial court, and the plaintiff, and the judge has decided. The plaintiff is rejected. The matters reach High Court, and an appeal is filed. In the appeal, notice is issued, and at that point of time, the defendants for the first time appear. Those are so it is possible that the learned judge has powers to reject the plaint even ex parte. According to me, there are cases which I know of are pending in the High Court.
So the second issue is that when there are such conflicting judgments,
yes,
there may be 10 judgments on the same issue in favor of rejection of a plaint. There may be few judgments against rejection of a plaint of the Honorable Supreme Court. At the stage of a trial court, will it not lead to a dilemma for the judges? Because if they don't follow one set of judgments, they will be contrary, or there will be a question of judicial indiscipline. If
yes,
they follow the other set of judgments, the other set of judgments. So therefore, there may be a trend whereby they may say that we may at this stage not want to interfere. We may reject the 711. You may go and appeal. challenge the order and then take it forward, and therefore leading to increase in litigations?
You're right. That is why my point number 30 was on this only, that the learned trial court also, with all due respect, poor fellows also, the honorable judges also find this difficult. Because even if they are convinced on facts, that yes, the facts are gross, that it is to be rejected, or the facts are good, it is not required to be rejected. The law which is trashed on the court is that it is required to be rejected on similar facts. The learned judge is in a dilemma. There is no doubt about it. And there are, all of us are aware that if a binding decision according to the party who comes to the higher court, if it is shown that it is a binding decision, contempt proceedings are also initiated against the learned judge, that he has not followed a binding precedent of the higher court or of the Honorable Supreme Court. That is how some courts, at least I have come across a few matters where some courts do say that the recent decision, as I stated, Chotanben, recent 2018 and 19, in a matter which is pending, if it is to be heard or it is being heard at that time, this judgment of Chotanben has come, for instance, and it is cited. A learned judge will not dare to decide that Chotanben did not consider the earlier judgment, and therefore I will do that. So this happens, and this happens, and then it comes to the Honorable High Court. The judge says that yes, this is there, but this is later in point of time, and therefore I am following this judgment. At times, very few, possibly very few handpicked honorable judges may of the trial court come to a conclusion that this is not considered, that is not considered. Then what happens is we make allegations before the High Court saying that despite this later judgment, the judges dared to interpret the judgment. So this situation does arise, and it arises time and again. All who are hearing it, all must have faced this, that binding decisions are not looked into, and therefore this topic, what I have tried to evolve on the terminology, that these are very relevant, law precedents become very relevant as far as 711 is concerned. So this issue does arise.
So someone has written that given such a situation, even at the level of Supreme Court judgments, is there any way in which proceedings can be initiated at the Supreme Court whereby a larger bench can be requested to be formed so that all of this can be decided and considered upon once and for all?
It can be done. It can be done because possibly, as if I'm not mistaken, most of the decisions are of co-equal bench, even of the Honorable Supreme Court. But as I'm saying, 711 purely falls, as I understand. 75% of the case is decided in the facts and circumstances only. The law is only, as I understand, is 25% or so, even less, if I can dare to say so. So therefore, this may become difficult for even the larger bench to decide on principle that no, because take a case of deemed knowledge, a registered document, public notice, unregistered document. Unregistered document can be used for collateral purpose. Unregistered document can be proved. Specific performance can be relief can be granted. Now these will all fall within the realm of clear facts, and therefore at times evidence is required. And therefore, I would feel that if the facts are gross, that the limitation is 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, etc., then as far as that, the larger bench, if it is someone persuades the Honorable High Court or the Honorable Supreme Court, can be formed and can decide on some of them, but not probably on all of the issues under Order 7-11, because again it will fall within the peculiar facts and circumstances of each case.
Sir, can a suit for specific performance based upon MOU be rejected when the MOU is unregistered and not even notarized?
No, as I know, the law says that no, that cannot be a ground for consideration under Order 7-11, because MOU will have to be tested while leading evidence. There are applications filed and there are applications which are considered that unregistered cash transaction, as I've given those illustrations earlier, can the suit go on? So the courts have said, one of the unreported decision in the Supreme Court, the court has said that you may not have a case of injunction. You may not be granted injunction. Plaintiff may not be granted injunction, but the suit cannot be thrown out. Ultimately, you will succeed. So there, as I know, the suits are usually not rejected, though my personal view is that suit should be rejected, because ultimately in today's world with this huge burden on judiciary, if such suits are permitted to be prolonged for decades or at least 5-10 years, it is travesty of justice, and there will be appeal, second appeal, etc., and it will be an endless litigation.
So can an order application under 711 be filed in a summary suit under 37?
Uh, there are applications which are filed. There are applications which are decided. But as far as I know, there is no law denying grant of such an application. There are applications which are rejected. Uh, Probably decision of Honorable Justice Shastri deciding CRA in 2019. There is a decision, if I'm not mistaken, where a 711 application was filed in a summary suit and was not granted and was affirmed by High Court that no, in summary suit this may not be a consideration because ultimately these are summary proceedings. So the proceedings otherwise had to be decided at the summary stage. So it may not be permitted to be shortcut by entertaining 711 application, subject to correction. As far as I know, applications are filed and are rejected also.
So at what stage can an application under 711 be filed?
Yes, as I stated, first stage is under manual. Second stage, after issuance of notice, the defendant files. But 4 judgments, which I can pass on later on, the 4 judgments, as far as I know, of the Honorable Supreme, one of our High Court, Honorable Justice M.R. Shah, and 3 other judgments, where the law is laid down that it can be, ultimately, the suit has to be rejected. It can be filed at any stage and can be considered even belatedly. If there is a case of 711, there is a case of 711. So there are judgments which I know, not contrary, but I know that it has to be considered. But again, that Order 6 Rule 17 principle will come into play, that what is the stage, the commencement of trial, as it is read in judgments of Order 6 Rule 17 amendment, that commencement of trial is framing of issues. Once issues are framed, then probably 711 application is usually not entertained. But prior to commencement of trial, that is framing of issues, the application, according to me, according to the law, can be filed and entertained.
So can an application, can a plea of Order 7 Rule 11 be taken up at the stage of appeal if it has not been taken up at the stage when the suit is instituted?
Here also matters are pending. There is a first appeal which is pending in High Court where 711 is considered. But the courts there, I have not been able to find any authoritative judgment on this or decision on this, which says that it can be considered and it is allowed. Because usually, while there are litigations pending, I know about it. There are litigations pending, but the issues are framed at the stage of trial, and the normal issue would be that whether the suit is maintainable or not for XYZ reason. One of the issues will be this. So usually the courts do say in the appeal that ultimately this is the issue. At the most, it can be decided as a preliminary issue under CPC. But by 711, you answer this issue, and if we are convinced on this issue, then we may not hear on the other issues.
So the other issue, one moment.
Yes.
What is your opinion whether issue of res judicata can be taken up in an Order 7 Rule 11 application?
No, res judicata, the judgment say it cannot be taken. The judgments, decisions of the Supreme Court, at least 2 of them, say that res judicata is not a ground to be taken at the stage of Order 7 Rule 11 application.
So in recent times, a view is being taken by the Honorable Gujarat High Court as well as the Honorable Apex Court that documents which ought to have been produced with the plaint but are not produced by the plaintiff can also be looked into by courts. What is your opinion on permissibility of such provision of 711 to this extent?
I didn't get it. That.
One moment.
Sorry.
In recent times, a view is being taken by the Honorable High Court as well as the Honorable Apex Court that documents which ought to have been produced with the plaint but are not produced by the plaintiff can be looked into by courts. What is your opinion on permissibility of starching of provision order of 711 to this extent?
I don't know about 711, but if such documents are produced for the first time or at a later stage, then Order 41 Rule 27 will have to be considered as additional evidence. Is it permissible or not? Can it be laid? Can it be produced at a stage of appeal or otherwise, or even in a suit at a later stage for additional evidence, as an additional evidence? Then the principles of Order 41 Rule 27 will have to be seen. Then Order 7 Rule 11 can be seen. But I am not having that knowledge that there is such an issue which is ever raised, that documents produced later on, and for that 711 would be entertained either way. because then it would fall within the realm of additional evidence. That does it is that document so relevant with that without that a judgment cannot be pronounced, or was that due diligence or not under Order 41 Rule 27?
Can a plane be rejected if the agreement is barred by Section 63 of the Tenancy Act?
Yes. Now there is a recent judgment of Honorable Justice Paidigal again, where I am not sure it is 711, but the judgment says that the agreement to sell under the provisions of Bombay Tenancy Act, now the Tenancy Act, their agreement is also barred. The word used is that no agreement also can be entered into. Now with that, there is a judgment of Honorable Justice A.S. Dave, Honorable Justice Bila Trivedi, and Honorable Justice Padiwala on the line that the document is otherwise barred by law, that the agreement could not have been entered. It is barred by the provisions of Tenancy Act. It could not have been entered, then why go for trial? So that issue is decided, that it can be considered. I'm not very sure on 711, but there is a law on this that the suit for specific performance is not maintainable. There is a divergent view. I think that is the recent judgment, reported judgment in GLR.
Sir, can a petition under Article 226 be filed seeking rejection of the suit if there is an abuse of process of courts and law?
No, I don't think so. Article 226 petition can be filed, because there is a remedy available, that suit order 7 rule 11 is there. If it is granted, and if it is not granted, what is to be filed? I don't think so. A petition would be maintainable. Either way, it is CRA, or if it is granted, then it would be first appeal by the losing party.
So can a plea of oral communication be taken to obviate limitation when filing a suit? In case of written communication, can a one-sided communication be treated as sufficient to obviate the provisions of Limitation Act?
Pardon? Just tell me.
Can a plea of oral communication be taken to obviate limitation while filing a suit? In case of written communication, can a one-sided communication be treated as sufficient to obviate the provisions of Limitation Act?
I think this again will go on the facts of the case, that we'll have to read that what is the, how is it one-sided as asserted by one party, and can it be looked into at the stage of order 7 rule 11? So I'm afraid I can give an answer on that for consideration of the debate we are having under order 7 rule 11. We'll have to look into that document, that how is it one-sided, one, and if it is an oral agreement, then what are the other factors which can be looked into? But there also I am afraid that order 7 rule 11 application can be entertained.
Just a moment, sir. I'm just,
Yes.
there are certain repeated queries, so that I'm just running through one of them, and I'll. Can trial court use power of reference to the parent high court to set to rest the controversy regarding conflicting judgments?
Pardon?
Can the trial court use the power of reference to a parent court, high court, to set to rest controversy in relation to conflicting judgments?
No, court, I have not come across such a reference. I'm not aware that it can be done or not, but I'm not sure it can be done or not, because the court will again look into the law precedent, that which is a prior in point of time, which is later co-equal strength. The facts ultimately will have to be seen. That I'm not aware.
Between an application under Order 14 Rule 2 and an application under Order 7 Rule 11, which application can be heard first?
It comes to but if the preliminary issue and 711, the contents are the same, then it does not make a difference which is to be heard first. Basically, it would be 711 which is to be heard first. But if the contents are somewhat different, that there are 2 common points and 2 different points, or it can be segregated. But usually for preliminary, it comes to the same thing, that 711 is also a preliminary of an issue. But if it is not touched in 14, then 14 will have to be heard. If there is something more in that, then it will have to be heard. That is what I understand.
If an unregistered agreement to sell mentions that possession is with the ATS holder, and therefore in prayer possession is not sought, can such a suit be rejected under 711?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Section 34 of Specific Relief Act also there are judgments, unreported judgments, as far as I know, that suits cannot be rejected under Order 7 Rule 11. That would be a matter of debate. That would be a matter of adjudication. That only after leading evidence, it can be a conclusion can be found out.
So what if there are several defendants and only some of them have taken the defense of 7-11? Will the suit have to be decided finally, as plaint cannot be rejected in part, even though it is actually barred against all defendants?
No. Therefore, I stated that there is a 2019 judgment which says that the plaint cannot be rejected in part. Now, in that judgment also, if it is seen, I have somewhere the citation that it is seen. The decision is not such that it just cannot be done. It says it should not be done. But the division bench judgment of Bombay High Court, reported in AIR, if I'm not mistaken, 2002 or 2001 or 2005, which has taken a view that it can be rejected in part, where some of the defendants for some of the cause of action. And I know, as a matter of fact, in a matter of Pune where I have appeared, right, the Honorable Supreme Court has rejected the revision. The plaint was rejected by Bombay High Court in divisional jurisdiction, CRA, and the Supreme Court has confirmed that plaint was rejected in part and confirmed by the Honorable Supreme Court. So, but this judgment is later in point of time, again, 2019. But then again, as I understand, it will fall within the inverted commas facts and circumstances of each case as far as such issues are concerned. That the facts are gross, then what happens?
So can a defendant produce documents as an evidence with support of 7-11 application? Can it be considered for deciding such application?
I don't think so. It can be considered because the plaint has to be read. Their law is very clear. There are no conflicting decisions on this. That the plain reading of the plaint, just perusal of the plaint, you have to establish prima facie that 7-11 can be filed. So I don't think so. Defense can be seen, nor any other documentary evidence list or some documents along with the written statement or reply to objections can be seen.
We'll take the last query now. If a plaintiff makes a prayer for protection of his possession based in a time-barred agreement, can the plaint be rejected on the ground of 7-11?
Pardon, just please repeat it again.
If plaintiff makes prayer for protection of his possession based on a time-barred agreement, can the plaint be rejected under Order 7 Rule 11?
I don't think so. It can be rejected under 7-11 because there also this will have to be dealt with on facts again. This probably not. 7-11, as I know, 7-11 it cannot be because this will again go to the root of the matter. The merits will have to be opened for looking into the issue that who is in possession, how is he asserting possession, how is the other side asserting possession or dispossession. So I think that will be a question of fact for which evidence will have to be laid.
I think we have taken sufficient questions. Anshin bhai, thank you so much.
Questions are going on. There's 71 on odd questions.
Yes. So thank you so much. It has been a fantastic session today. We will be again tomorrow, same time at 4 o'clock. We'll have Anshin bhai speak and take us through the entire overview of the land revenue code. I think that is also going to be an extremely thought-provoking session tomorrow. So see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shah, Mr. Vishwas Shah, and Parth, all three of you, and all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Participated. I'm grateful
sir,
for all the participation.
We express our sincere gratitude toward this lucid webinar. You even enlightening us a very new area of such current subject. Thank you very much, sir.
I tried my best. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I need your permission to help.